After April 15th, 500 XRP does not need moon math. It needs one signal: whether the clarity decision makes exchanges and funds stop treating XRP like a legal risk asset. If that switch flips, every extra dollar is another $500 in your bag. If it does not, the repricing window closes fast. In this video, I'll show you which signal hits first and why it matters more than the headline itself. That makes this a decision window video, not a price prediction video. I am going to show you the first access signal that matters, how quickly it can change market behavior, and what that realistically means for a 500 XRP holder the morning after April 15th. The useful question is not whether the speech sounds bullish, it is whether the market starts acting like access risk is lower. Start with the first number. At 500 XRP, every $1 move changes the value of the bag by $500. That sounds obvious, but most people still think in percentage terms and miss the practical impact. If XRP stays around the same area, 500 XRP feels like dead money. If a regulatory catalyst helps push it $2 higher over time, that same bag changes by $1,000. At $4 higher, it is $2,000. That is why the April window matters, not because one hearing or decision magically sends XRP vertical overnight, but because the market begins pricing a different probability tree. Now add the institutional layer. XRP does not need every large institution to buy it tomorrow. It only needs a few gatekeepers, allocators, or platforms to feel incrementally safer discussing exposure, custody, or infrastructure around it. Markets reprice on marginal changes. If the legal and policy environment starts looking less hostile, the discount rate attached to XRP can compress fast. That is the part retail often notices late. Retail waits for the clean headline. Bigger money watches where the friction is shrinking. Here is where most viewers get the setup wrong. They assume the obvious outcome is the only outcome. Either April 15th brings a dramatic win and XRP rips, or nothing happens and the whole story dies. Markets are usually messier than that. Sometimes the first move is not caused by the final law itself. It is caused by a perception shift that the path is becoming more navigable. That can be enough to reopen attention, increase discussion around access, and pull forward buying from people who were previously waiting on the sidelines. So let's translate that into actual bag consequences before this gets too abstract. If you hold 500 XRP and the market continues treating XRP as politically constrained, then your upside can stay capped by hesitation. In that case, maybe the bag behaves like a range-bound asset and your gain is limited to smaller swings. But if the market starts believing the policy wall is weakening even before everything is finalized, the same 500 XRP can become a leverage point on changing sentiment. That does not mean guaranteed riches. It means the return profile changes faster than people expect. This is the point where a lot of holders should hit, like if they want more XRP videos built around real scenario math instead of recycled hype, because the numbers here are much clearer than the noise. Let's walk through three paths. Path 1 is the muted path. The April 15th window comes and the market gets no clean signal it can confidently build on. In that case, XRP may still trade on broader crypto sentiment, but it does not get its own sustained re-rating. For a 500 XRP holder, that usually means modest movement. A 50-cent move adds $250. A $1 move adds $500. Useful, but not life-changing. The main lesson in that scenario is that bag size matters more than optimism. If conviction is high, but size is low, then the result may still feel underwhelming. Path 2 is the re-rating path. This is where the market does not get perfection, but it gets enough to believe the probability of future access, legitimacy, and institutional comfort is improving. This is the most interesting scenario because it is also the one most likely to be mispriced at first. In this case, traders stop valuing XRP purely as a courtroom story or a speculative coin and begin pricing it more like an asset with a gradually improving policy backdrop. For 500 XRP, A move from a low single-digit zone toward materially higher levels starts to matter quickly. A $2 gain is $1,000, a $3 gain is $1,500, a $5 gain is $2,500. That is not a moonshot narrative, that is basic bag math. Path 3 is the acceleration path. This is where the April catalyst helps unlock a broader chain. More confidence, more coverage, more listings comfort, more institutional conversation, and then stronger reflexive demand. This is the path people on social media usually jump to immediately, but they skip the steps in between. If XRP ever gets into that kind of momentum regime, then even a modest bag can surprise you. On 500 XRP, a move of $8 changes the bag by $4,000. A move of $10 changes it by $5,000. Again, that does not mean it happens next week. It means the bag is more torque sensitive than many holders admit. Now for the midpoint turn. If the April 15th window really matters, where does the first meaningful repricing show up? Probably not in some dramatic overnight declaration that settles every debate forever. It shows up in confidence spreads. You will see it in how analysts talk, how platforms position around the asset, how quickly negative assumptions stop dominating the conversation, and whether institutions begin testing the edge of involvement rather than avoiding the subject entirely. The first repricing is psychological before it becomes obvious on a chart. That matters because many holders are waiting for proof that is too late to be useful. They want the all-clear signal after price has already moved, but by the time the market fully agrees that friction is shrinking, 500 XRP has already been repriced by the people who moved earlier. This is the trap. People think a small bag means timing does not matter much. In reality, timing matters more, because small bags rely on cleaner entries and cleaner catalysts to produce satisfying outcomes. Let's make this personal. If you hold 250 XRP, even a big move may feel emotionally exciting but financially limited. If you hold 500 XRP, you are in the zone where catalyst quality starts to matter a lot. If you hold 1000 XRP, every extra dollar is $1,000. At 2500 XRP, every extra dollar is $2,500. And if someone has built to 5000 XRP, then a $3 difference in eventual outcome is $15,000. Same asset, same catalyst family, radically different consequence depending on bag size. This is also where I want your comment. What bag size changes the setup most in your view? 500 XRP, 1000 XRP, or 5000 XRP? And do you think the April catalyst matters more for sentiment, access, or institutional confidence? There is another angle people are not taking seriously enough. When a policy catalyst appears, the market does not only price the event, it prices the removal of excuses. For a long time, one of the easiest ways to stay away from XRP was to say the regulatory picture is too unclear. If that excuse gets weaker, then some capital that ignored XRP does not need to become fully bullish. It just needs to stop being fully dismissive. That shift alone can matter more than the loudest headlines. And this is why institutional implications deserve a hard look. If major financial names, custody channels, or market infrastructure players start seeing less headline risk around XRP, the conversation changes from whether they can touch it to how they would touch it. Exposure does not need to arrive as a giant announcement. Sometimes it arrives as product readiness, research coverage, platform comfort, or exploratory allocation. That is enough to affect the narrative around value. Subscribe if you want the follow-up on the institutional side, because the next phase of this story is not just price. It is whether improving policy optics actually changes who can participate and how fast that participation scales. Now let's pay off the question from the start. What does the April 15th clarity window actually change for 500 XRP before the crowd catches up? It changes the market's discounting mechanism. If the market begins to believe regulatory friction is shrinking, then 500 XRP stops being valued only through present uncertainty and starts being valued through future access. That does not guarantee a specific number on a specific day. It changes the range of numbers the market is willing to consider realistic So the smartest way to think about 500 XRP right now is not, will this one event make me rich? It is, does this event reduce enough friction to justify a higher long-term multiple on the same bag? If the answer stays no, then expectations should stay grounded. If the answer becomes maybe, the bag starts to matter more. If the answer becomes increasingly yes over the next few weeks and months, then even 500 XRP can look a lot more important than it did before the window opened. That is the hidden mismatch. Small bags feel insignificant during uncertainty and suddenly feel very relevant during repricing. The crowd usually notices that only after the market has already adjusted. The better question is not whether 500 XRP sounds big. The better question is whether the reason it was discounted is finally getting weaker. If it is, then the value of being early is not emotional, it is mathematical. If April 15th Clarity Act decision window in Washington really changes the market's expectations, 500 XRP stops being an abstract number and starts behaving like a real position with real timing risk. If this breakdown helped, hit like so more XRP holders see it, subscribe for the institutional follow-up, and drop your bag size in the comments with the catalyst you think matters most next. One more thing matters here. If the market starts to price this catalyst earlier than expected, it usually shows up in positioning, language, and liquidity before it shows up in the loudest headlines. The point is not to wait for a perfect signal after everyone agrees. It is to understand what changes first, what that does to your own bag math, and why the repricing window can close before most holders feel comfortable calling it obvious. So here is the direct answer to the opening question. April 15th only matters if it changes confidence fast enough to shrink the access discount on XRP. If that happens, a 500 XRP bag will not suddenly become magical, but it can stop behaving like deadweight and start behaving like real optionality. The signal to watch is not the loudest post-vote headline. It is whether exchanges, large holders, and institutions begin acting like regulatory friction is lower the next day. That is the point where the bag math becomes real. There is also a practical reason small bag holders should care early instead of waiting for social proof. The market often reprices a catalyst in layers. First, it changes the language around the asset. Then it changes who is willing to hold through uncertainty. Then it changes how much upside people are willing to model from a cleaner policy setup. For 500 XRP, that sequence may not create life-changing math overnight, but it can absolutely change whether the bag feels stagnant. Well, that is why the April 15th decision matters before the whole market agrees on what it means. For a real XRP holder, that extra context matters because the market does not wait for perfect consensus before it reprices a catalyst. It starts leaning in stages, and that staged repricing is exactly where disciplined bag math beats emotional reaction.